You are listening to the ReRACEables podcast. Hello and welcome back to the ReRACEables podcast. I am your host Tom, joined tonight with my wife Nicole.
Hello.
And we are here to talk about leg one of The Amazing Race. So the first thing to discuss is the opening. Typically, we usually see Phil at some location with each of the 11 teams joining him, and they get to him in some elaborate way. Speedboats, pickup trucks, whatever. This time was a little bit different.
There was no elaborate, dramatic opening. It was everybody shown in their own homes with their loved ones, packing up and then getting a video message on their phone from Phil saying ready, set, go.
What did you think of the opening of just having the show open that way?
I definitely missed the dramatic beginning, especially because this all just seemed kind of pointless because they all end up starting at the same point in London anyway. But it also really brought me back to like early 2000s when companies used to pay to advertise their product within a reality TV show. So, like, for example, you'd be watching America's Next Top Model, and they'd be like, oh, yeah, let me just call you on my T-Mobile sidekick. And they'd, like, not so casually work in the technology. That's what this felt like, except they weren't advertising technology. It just seemed so forced of, hey, look at us. We're using a video to start this.
On our cell phones.
On our cell phones.
Yeah.
But it's like, that just seems so irrelevant.
Right, and it deemed to be irrelevant, just like you said, because everybody gets the message from Phil on the phone. There's no branding, so it was just a message on the phone. They all had to go to London, and all of us watching are saying, well, is that fair? How is that fair? People, Anthony and Spencer are in L.A. I think Caro and Ray were starting from L.A. Two teams were starting in North Carolina. One was in Jersey, and they all have to get to London, and the race all started. That was a little confusing.
It was confusing, and it was, again, just silly, because they all start at the same point in London anyway, because that would be the only fair way to start the race.
The whole beginning part was kind of irrelevant.
Yeah.
So let's go to the start in London then. Everybody is in London, and there's no group gathering. It's just all of a sudden, around a corner, sprints everybody. Again, that kind of deemed everything on the phone messaging kind of worthless and made me think, did they actually start in London and have everybody do the whole welcome to the amazing race? Phil lays out the rules, and then he does the go. But because this is going to be eventually stopped by COVID-19, did they have to rethink the beginning and frame the show and the beginning of the show in a different way from their homes with that whole kind of different beginning concept? Because eventually the season's going to take a very different turn because of COVID.
Yeah, I don't know. And maybe that will be explained more as we go on. But I really did miss Phil's opening line. Like, It's so dramatic, but it's great because it builds the anticipation of everybody's excitement and sizing each other up.
Absolutely.
Looking at all the other teams, their competition. And
that was something I talked about with every team from last season that I interviewed on the ReRACEables podcast. What was it like at the Hollywood Bowl when Phil's about to say go? And they all described this moment as kind of magical. This other moment within a bigger moment of just being on the show, right? You see everyone, you're in this place, and you know that this great adventure is about to start. And we all get to sense that at home. And, well, because of this start, we missed out on that. Next thing, the one thing I thought they did a really, really nice job on, and I don't know if they did this on 32 or prior seasons, but I really liked how we got to know the teams. During the episode, we got to see Connie and Sam's home life and their adopted son. We got to see Kim and Penn's workstations at home and how they kind of film their videos and that whole thing. We got to see Akbar's Lights On program at Westside High School kind of come to life and how Sherry partakes in feeding the kids at night in their community. And I thought it was very seamless. I loved the way it flowed. And I just really liked that piece of it to get to know the teams. Because again, we are, as much as we love the race and seeing places around the world, this is a story about people. And we have 11 storylines going. And I just really enjoyed how the show put that all together for us to get to know the teams. So the race starts in London. We get to the first clue in Trafalgar Square, where teams have to find a clue in one of the people wearing one of the classic London phone booths, one of those red phone booths that is synonymous with London. And from there, they have to go by foot to Buckingham Palace, which takes us to the Detour. And the Detour really was the bulk of this leg of the race. And the Detour was Artist Den versus Digibin. Artist Den being...
The teams have to put together a puzzle that's plastered on the wall, but it's not directly told to them that it's a puzzle. And some teams figured that out sooner than others.
And it's in the style of a famous artist that's from London, so that's why they did it. And on the other hand, we had Digibin, which was basically a scavenger hunt around the city, and on foot you had to go find Bobby at Big Ben, then go find Little Ben, and then find Digibin. So there are the choices. Artist Den, which was a puzzle, Digibin, which was a scavenger hunt. Which was the better choice?
Digibin was clearly the better choice. People did it much quicker, or so it seems. And I'm curious if it was written differently on the clue, if people knew that it would be a puzzle, if they would still choose that.
The Artist Den.
Yes.
Well, it had to not be written because some teams did not get that memo.
Right. Or did they not read the clue?
Right, good question. But I have to agree. I think the Digibin was better because it was a scavenger hunt. It seemed a little more direct than an art, and maybe you have to remember something. Maybe there's different, who knows where you're walking into, as vast as the Natural Museum that we end up at the end of at the pit stop, right? It could be this massive place with who knows how many things to look through.
I think the tricky part was in when people made mistakes with the art, like if there was a space between the pieces or if there was a piece that was placed incorrectly, it was very difficult to correct the mistake.
Right.
Because they're dealing with glue, they're dealing with pieces that are ripping. It was a mess.
And it easily could have gotten out of control, which it did for some teams.
Yeah.
But let's put a pin in that for now. Let's just talk about Digibin, because I think it was the better choice. It seemed very direct. You have to go to these 3 places. You have to find these 3 things. The real challenge seems to be finding a Bobby.
Yes. So the Bobby, as we the viewer know, is a police officer in London.
Right, with the strap kind of around, like a chin strap on and the pointy helmet. And not exactly clear.
No, it took some teams a while to figure that out, and Sam seemed to find it by mistake.
Yeah, plus they were already behind because they had the long cab ride that went a different way and got them to Trafalgar Square last. They were already in last. They found the first 2 or 3 phone booths that didn't have clues left. So Connie and Sam were already behind. Then they choose Digibin, which actually ended up being the best thing that could have happened to them, aside from others' mistakes at the Artist Den detour. But yeah, Sam was hilarious. Just running around London.
He's just talking to himself. Ben, we're looking for a Ben. And
Bobby.
A Bobby, sorry. And then luckily, the Bobby says, "That's me." If he didn't say that, he'd be, who knows how long it would take him to find it.
Right. Anthony and Spencer and Ryan and Dusty kind of linked up. They kind of joined forces. They found the Bobby pretty quickly, called the guy right out. Some other teams, Raquel and Kayla, they knew London, so they knew what they were kind of looking for. They knew what Big Ben was. They knew kind of where to go, and they found it pretty quickly. Even Akbar and Sherry, as well as obviously Connie and Sam, they had trouble. They didn't know what a Bobby was. Would you have known what a Bobby was?
No.
I don't think I would have known either, but it also seemed like a lot of teams didn't think to just ask somebody.
Right. I would have thought to just ask a local, "Hey, what's a Bobby?"
Right, immediately. Like Connie and Sam didn't seem to think to do that, or even Akbar and Sherry. Right, Akbar and Sherry ended up asking later after they got that clue and they finished the detour about what Boris Johnson looks like, and the cab driver told them that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you learn that season 1 of Amazing Race. Always use the locals. Their knowledge is so valuable.
Especially in an English-speaking country where there's very little barrier.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the Bobby thing should have never been a problem. But did you notice also that what other problem in the first leg of the Digibend detour was Big Ben looked like it had a giant scaffolding around it. It looked like it was being worked on.
I did not notice that.
Yeah, it looked like there was, maybe I'm wrong, but I remember one of the teams saying, "Look, that's got to be Big Ben. It's a giant clock face." But that was all you saw. It wasn't what it usually looks like. It looked like it might have been under construction. And it was at night. And how many of them have been to London? Maybe Raquel and Kayla, but that's it. From there, they had to go from Big Ben and where the Bobby was standing outside of to find Little Ben, which turned out to be a miniature version of Big Ben. And it was on the street, and they found this kind of promoter girl who had like a see-through umbrella and a wig on. She seemed a little bit easier to target than the Bobby. And then the final one was the Digibend, which was in the Piccadilly Circus train station, which I think we would have done well at, having some experience living in New York. London seems to function somewhat like a New York City does, with it's a city, there's landmarks, there's underground train stations, subways, whatever.
Cabs,
right. It seems like we would have done well, and it seems like some of the teams adapted pretty well to that. But let's head over to the Artist Den, which turned out to be the harder part of the detour. It didn't say it was a puzzle. Come to this place. This artist greets you. He shows you to a wall. He gives you these pieces of paper. And then you have to take it from there.
I thought it was interesting seeing Penn working on it. He kind of attributed his strength to his ADHD and his ability to hyper-focus on a task. It's kind of cool to see someone use something typically thought of as a disability to his advantage.
You saw also the communication between him and Kim come out and see as a real strength for them in this particular detour, because it seemed like the best way to go about business on the Artist Den was one person kind of makes sense of a piece, and then one person's got the whole thing in place, right? And one person's kind of taking the lead, one person's kind of seeing it from afar. One person's moving the pieces, one person's kind of just supervising. Not necessarily telling the other person, but just kind of overseeing it and kind of like, should we go and put it up on the wall? No, let's keep it here. And I felt like the teams who did less, there was less talking and more just focused on the issue, the puzzle, they did better. Like a Kim and Penn, like even Taylor and Isaiah, and like
Caro and
Ray.
They did well with it.
Right, Carol kind of took the reins and said, "I'm going to do this, 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 this," and Ray just said, "Okay," and they kind of knocked it out quick. But on the other hand, the teams that seemed to kind of struggle were the teams that were not communicating well. Arun and Natalia were yelling at each other over little gaps in their puzzle that they put up there. Who else?
Lulu, Lala.
Oh, they were there. They were really bad. Lulu and Lala. This is where being twins and being kind of the same person, they must have finished each other's sentence 5-6 times during the leg, but they didn't really have a good balance of who takes the lead and does a puzzle and who kind of takes the back seat. They were kind of competing. We have to say the single worst version of this was Mike and Mo.
Mike and Mo?
Yeah, Mike and Mo struggled really hard at Artistan. Yeah, they were. Yeah, it was brutal. It was hard to watch.
I felt bad for them.
Right, because they're such likable.
They're nice guys.
Right, they got a great story, a great relationship. This whole
seeing the pieces just in shambles.
Right. So for those listening, Mike and Mo get to the artist den, and they get to their wall, and they start taking pieces and just gluing it on the wall.
Slapping them on, haphazard, no rhyme or reason. They think they're just slapping things on and moving on.
Yeah, and they didn't have that aha discovery moment that other teams did when they realized this is a puzzle. Oh, okay. And Mike and Mo just on national television buried themselves, and you saw it. And then the camera shots that like you said, it was the pieces, or this piece was in pieces, or the rips in the paper, because again, once you put it on the wall, it was really difficult to move it, and it was a disaster for them.
Yeah, and that just shows how poorly Lulu Lala probably did, because theirs were not ripping, and yet they ended up, editing made it seem like they finished around the same time.
And they did. And the race ultimately for this whole leg, because there was no roadblock, there was no fast forward, there was nothing. It was just kind of navigating the city by foot to the couple route infos and then getting to the detour. And that choice, again, of Digibend versus Artistan, and like many reality shows, Survivor, whatever, the puzzle becomes the make or break point. And Mike and Mo actually were on the edit done before Lulu and Lala.
Right.
Not by a lot, but they did beat them because the artists ended up giving Mike and Mo
new pieces.
Right, which made me think, did they ask? Was it edited?
Or was it, I feel like it got to the point where it was unsalvageable, where they couldn't finish unless they got fresh pieces.
Right, but it still seemed like they had a chance because they said, we got to beat the girls, and they were right there with them. So I wonder if they just eventually asked people or the artists for new pieces, why they didn't do that sooner, or would they have risked a penalty?
Yeah, I don't know.
Tough to say, but they were done before Lulu and Lala, and ultimately it comes down to like it does in many seasons. Mike and Mo didn't have the right cab. Cab overshot where they were supposed to go. Lulu and Lala get to that next clue before them, which then is to go to the pit stop at the Natural History Museum in London. And in the end, Mike and Mo end up coming in last, and the first team eliminated.
Surprising. I mean, they were my number 3 team. Clearly, I expected much more. If it was a different challenge, I think they would have gotten further. I think they just got unlucky with this.
Yeah, it was a big loss for you. It was a big loss for Jeremy. You both had Mike and Mo as team number 3. Josh had Mike and Mo at team number 6. I had them as team number 8. And Lizzie had them at team number 9, which puts Lizzie in the lead after this.
Damn it, Lizzie!
Yeah, she does it again. Last season, she nailed Nathan and Cody being first out in her number 11 team. Do you see the Nathan and Cody, Mike and Mo first out connection DNA at all?
No. You can't compare the noodlers to the singing police officers.
I think you can. Can I make the case?
Go right ahead.
I think the common thread is they just don't have. I think their lives are very regimented, and I said this in our previous podcast. I think people like Mike and Mo, I think people like Nathan and Cody, they do live these cool, unique lives for sure. And Mike and Mo have their singing. Nathan and Cody had their noodling. We're catching catfish with their bare hands, but I don't see a lot of puzzles in their life. I don't see a lot of running and getting in cabs and getting around town or flying. I don't see a lot of that happening in their life. Like I said, Mike and Mo, very local, not global. I don't think they've been to many Londons in their time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I see the same in Nathan and Cody. And let's just go down the rundown of team number 1 was Anthony and Spencer, who win the trip prize. Team number 2, Dusty and Ryan. 3, Raquel and Kayla. 4, Kim and Penn. 5, Caro and Ray. 6, Akbar and Sherry. 7, Connie and Sam on a huge comeback. Number 8, Taylor and Isaiah. 9, Arun and Natalia. 10, Lulu and Lala. What did you learn from this episode?
Well, I cried when I saw the guys win.
Anthony and Spencer.
Yeah, I just was so happy for them. I don't know. I just like them. I think they're amazing people, and I think they should be pampered.
I didn't quite have the same reaction, again, considering I put them at number 11. Really because of their story being so crazy, unique, that there's no way they're going to win the Amazing Race 2. But definitely not surprised by them and Dusty and Ryan and Raquel and Kayla finishing 1, 2, and 3. So the things that I learned, with Lulu and Lala, I saw a lot of contention. I saw a lot of kind of bad communication we talked about before.
They're not lasting long.
No, it would seem that they won't. So who did you love?
I love Dusty and Ryan. Love them. Think they're great. I love Spencer and
Anthony.
Love them. And I love the flight attendants.
Yes.
I like them more than I thought I would. They're very likable. And I think they will go far. And
I feel really good about the flight attendants, Raquel and Kayla, my team number 1. Feel really good about them. They felt comfortable in the race. They were having fun with it, hugging local people, not afraid to ask. They seem to enjoy being with each other. This is nothing new for them. This is definitely an adventure. And I just liked everything I saw from them. One other team I really liked was Kim and Penn. I thought that their dynamic, their communication, they're having fun with this. I think it speaks to the kind of people they are. They're not taking it too seriously, even though they do take it seriously in that whole hyper-focus and the puzzle moment.
Yeah.
And also I like, as I said in the Power Rankings podcast, I ranked Kim and Penn 4th. That's where they ended up being in this leg. But I really think that they understand their dynamic. Penn takes the lead, and Kim's right there. Or Kim will take a lead at some point, I'm sure, and Penn will be right there to follow along. And I think being married, working together, spending so much time, as they said, in dog years, over 100 years together, really will benefit them, where I think it will fall short for Caro and Ray, who none of us liked in our preseason power rankings. And though they got past this first leg, they'll probably get past the second leg, but I just don't see that communication piece with them the same way I see it with a Kim and Penn, or even Arun and Natalia, who finished behind them, or Connie and Sam.
It's like us in quarantine.
Yeah, which
have relationships in dog years now.
Right, and this is going to be an interesting thing as we go forward, because COVID is coming in the race, and it's going to affect it undoubtedly. Akbar and Sherry, I thought maybe the most entertaining. Can I just go down some of Akbar's quotes?
I know you would.
I mean, Akbar to me is like, he's an educator. His wife's an educator. There's those quotes that teachers put up in their classrooms that they get at like some school supply store, and they're just random little posters that they put up all over each classroom, and kids look at them for 180 days straight, and they read them 6 million times. I think Akbar has memorized the entire catalog of those signs, because he was a walking, talking poster board of motivational quotes.
Yeah.
Number 1, pain is weakness leaving your body. Number 2, no, that's lose and steady, because Sherry was like, slow and steady wins the race, and his reply was, no, that's lose and steady, which was funny. Number 3, who you racing for? Because you're letting them down. Like, clearly, you can just hear him talking in quotes to his students and his entire school community all the time. Number 4, you got to talk about it, you got to be about it. Number 5, can't let fatigue make cowards out of people. And then the last one after they finished, I believe is when it happened, was, live with no regrets.
I mean, it was clearly driving his wife crazy. She called it nagging. And I felt bad for her. Clearly, she was having trouble keeping up with him.
Not that he was moving any swift, quickly, whatever.
I mean, at one point, they were both D1 athletes. And I think
25 years ago.
Yeah, like it clearly hit them that that's not who they are today. And she was struggling, and I felt so bad for her.
I think this is what we all saw, except for Jeremy, and is why all of us put Akbar and Sherry at 9, 11, 11, 9. Nice couple, like them, love what they're all about, their whole story, but racing around the world, I don't see it.
Girlfriend needed a better bra.
Yeah.
It was rough.
How did you like it being in one place, just in London?
I think it's what needs to happen for the first leg, to keep it simple so that the Amazing Race can give you the background stories and you can get to know each team. You got to keep it simple so that it leaves time for those segments.
Right. If you are having 11 teams run around different countries, airport 3 times, you lose time and you lose that backstory piece, which is really important, especially in episode 1. Does it expose anybody? I don't know that it exposed anybody. I think it weeds out some of the lesser teams that couldn't even handle getting around a city that speaks English and things like that.
Yeah.
Last thing before we jump back into episode 1, leg 2 of the race. Our power rankings update. Now with Mike and Mo out, we've crossed them off everyone's power rankings. And when we add up the remaining numbers of our rankings, here's how the standings shake out. Again, lowest score is in first place. So in tied for 4th, we have Nicole and Jeremy with 63 points because they had Mike and Mo 3rd. In 4th place with 60 points is Josh, who had Mike and Mo 6th. In 2nd place with 56 points is Tom, with having Mike and Mo in 8th. And in 1st place after leg 1 is Lizzie with 55 points. She ranked Mike and Mo the lowest at her 9 spot. So when you remove that 9, she has the lowest at 55. So congrats to Lizzie on leading through leg 1, just like she did in season 32. So we'll see. We're going to jump into the second half of the episode. We didn't even realize that it was a 2-part. That's how unprepared we were. But we're going to jump in and we'll be back on the ReRACEables podcast. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are here after episode 1 and the second leg of The Amazing Race, season 33. Nicole, we spent 2 legs in one double episode, all in London. Are we still in on the whole idea of having it all be in one place?
Yeah, sure. It's the first episode. Introductions. Now let's get into some strategy, technique. Let's separate the men from the boys, the women from the girls.
I like London. There's nothing wrong with it. I like the challenges. I like learning about London. I'd like to go to London. But I wonder if staying in London for a double leg like they did was just a cost reasoning. Was it a logistical reasoning? I don't have really necessarily a problem with it. I don't really like it, but I just wonder why that's the motivation, because 2 legs, same one city. I get you could spend the whole race in London, but why have I didn't understand that. So the first thing we come up to is the Roadblock, which was the mail rail. So the teams had to choose one person to ride the little Disney-looking monorail, tiny little train. It looked like a kiddie park amusement ride underground to a loading dock where they used to use to deliver mail in London. And they had to dig through a giant mail bin to find a clue, which was 1 out of 1,000 pieces of mail or whatever. What'd you think of the Roadblock, and who do you think of us would have been better suited for that?
Most of the teams were expecting it to be much more challenging than it was. Some teams found it within 15 seconds. And so that made people second guess whether they did it correctly. I think also what may have tripped some teams up was the fact that the clue, the envelope, was not the typical yellow Amazing Race envelope.
Right.
It was more of like a manila folder color.
Right. So the challenge of this was patience to take the slow little train ride in, patience to dig through methodically through the big mail bin that each person had the same mail bin with the same boxes with the same amount of letters, the patience to deal with the fact that this could, I think it was Ryan that said it, this could take 3 hours.
Mm-hmm. And like some teams started opening boxes, like
Sure.
unwrapping boxes and opening them, whereas Raquel was like, no, it's not going to be in a box. I'm going to keep this simple. It's going to be in the bottom of the bin. And sure enough, it was in the bottom of the bin.
But was that what you were expecting?
I don't know what I would expect.
I think I would have expected it to be a lot more difficult. I think Ryan, maybe somebody else, I forget, but I think Ryan said maybe the letter has our name on it.
Right.
Which would make sense, right? That here's this giant mail bin, and there's all these little letters, and there's big boxes, there's small boxes, there's tiny boxes, there's medium boxes. Yeah, I would think, too, that especially being a historian of the show, I better look at every single one of these envelopes to see if it says Tom on it, and then, oh, that's the one I got to take.
Yeah.
Or this one's got a tiny little flag on it, that's the one I got to take. Again, maybe the clue had a little picture of what they were looking for, but we didn't see that. So you have to assume it would have been more complicated.
I think if we were running the race, I would be the one to do this because it seemed like more of a hunt and peck, detail-oriented type of task.
Right, not even so much a needle in a haystack. I don't think we could, now obviously seeing it, hindsight's 2020, but it has a whiff of a needle in a haystack, but more a hunt and peck thing, like you said. And I think you would have been better suited for it.
Thank you. Now here's a question for you. When the two teams were overthinking it.
Penn and Ray.
Penn and Ray, yes.
2 men, by the way.
And they were asking, was it Spencer?
No, Anthony.
Anthony, sorry.
Right, because Anthony got there first, and Penn and Ray came later, and Anthony had just missed the rail train to get out of there, which brought Penn and Ray, and Anthony shared with them when they asked, like, yeah, this is the clue. He held it up for them. He showed it to them.
Right, he was very honest, and
Penn and Ray showed their clue to him.
They were hesitant to believe that he was being honest.
They were very suspicious.
Now,
Ray specifically.
Anthony could have really pulled a fast one. Here is an opportunity where someone could have really made a move. If Boston Rob was in Anthony's position, what would Boston Rob do?
First of all, Boston Rob would have been there in the front of the pack like Anthony and Spencer were. I feel like the easy answer is to say he would have deceived them. And he probably would have. I think he's too smart. I think the right move was to just...
Smart?
He's too smart. He's got to smarten up. That's it, right? I think he would have done what Anthony did, was just kind of tell them the truth, or maybe he would have told them nothing. I don't think he would have necessarily deliberately deceived them.
Right, because you don't want to, right off the bat, make two enemies.
Especially knowing you're in the front, right? There's very little reasoning for that. It's too early in the race. He's smart enough to know that you got to have allies in this game to get far. And I was honestly a little surprised that Anthony didn't make more of a push to build an alliance right there. Be like, yeah, guys, this is the clue. I mean, he was very clear.
He was very
This is what I'm going with, and they didn't believe him. Now, I think Ray showed his young reality TV past colors by saying, I don't believe him at all. And that's the only other thing I could think of, is that Penn's hyper focus that he was using for the puzzle in the first leg and now in the second on the roadblock. Did it come back to bite him?
I think it was more so just a case of them overthinking it. I don't think it was hyper focus. I think he was just...
Well, I'm saying his personality of, I'm so focused on this thing and I'm on the Amazing Race and I got to be meticulous on everything like I just was on this puzzle last night. It can't be that easy.
Yeah, I think they were overthinking it. They thought it would be much more complicated than it was.
Really cost them, because it helped Connie, Sherry, and Arun catch up to them. And Connie, Arun, and Sherry all found it in...
very quickly.
Just like Raquel did. Amazing how one roadblock could really flip the game on some of these teams that we saw come out on top in the first leg. From there, they go to Leicester Square. At Leicester Square, let's go with Leicester. They find the next Detour. And we have Bullseye Mate versus Decorate. And so on the Bullseye Mate, it was a darts challenge where each team would have to throw 3 darts. And on one turn, they both have to hit a bullseye in the same round to advance. Versus the Decorate challenge, which was to decorate cakes with 2 European flags on them. Right, using fruit and whatnot to decorate, and icing and the whole thing. Which one do you think was the better choice, and which one do you think in the moment we would have chosen?
I think I would have chosen the cake decorating, because I am more familiar with baking than I am with throwing darts. However, I think the people that did the darts finished quicker.
Seemed that way, right?
That's how it seemed based on editing.
That was Dusty and Ryan, Sam and Connie, Arun and Natalia. So only 3 out of the 10 teams chose the Bullseye Mate darts. And I think I'm not surprised that Dusty and Ryan, Sam and Connie chose that. I think, again, athletes, male-dominated, adrenaline, testosterone, darts. They even got a pint of beer.
Yeah.
Very indicative. Arun and Natalia, though, props to them. Glad they chose it. I think that's awesome, too.
What would you have chosen?
I think I would have opted for the darts.
That's what I thought.
Again, I just can't help but think it's go to this place and hit darts. That's all. We know we have to do that, and it's very defined, and that's it. And again, maybe the clue would have been less informative, but I would have obviously opted for that. Not that I think that I don't think the Decorate was that much worse. I think I would have been great at that as well. And if you would have chose that, fine. I think in the moment, like I asked you before, I think in the moment I would have thought of, even with all the information, to know your comfort level was Decorate, and we would have went with that.
Well, the big thing was knowing which countries were part of the European Union.
Yeah. Which I would have nailed. I'm a big flag guy. Would have nailed it.
Yeah, and I think I right away when I was watching it, I was thinking to myself, you better count those blueberries, because That's always like something like that would mess a team up. So I know right away, I would go right away, count how many blueberries in a row, how many strawberries in a row.
Right, because when you go to the decorate part of the Detour challenge, if you chose that, which 7 teams did, Raquel and Kayla, Anthony and Spencer, Akbar Sherry, Ray and Carol, Kim and Penn, Taylor Isaiah, Lulu Lala. Not only do you have to choose 2 European countries among, maybe there's like how many? There had to be at least 15.
Everyone seemed to do the same too, which makes me
Right, but they had to hold on, but they had to choose. That it's not like they just made this up. There was all these models out there, and they had South Africa, they had Jamaica, they had obviously France, Germany, Norway. They had UK. They had some European countries, but then they had a lot of distractors, a lot of wrong.
But
choices.
do you think once people started getting it, they just copied the 2 that they saw other teams doing? I think that
absolutely
had to be because everyone was doing what France and
yes. In the end, everyone did France and Germany.
France and Germany.
I think it was literally every single team
Yeah,
did France and Germany.
But there were other choices they could have done.
Right. And so Raquel and Kayla were, I think, the first ones there. And they actually chose the UK. And they wrong. Brexit, right? That was a big no-no for them. They were told they were wrong. Anthony and Spencer, they didn't tell Raquel and Kayla that they knew about Brexit and that the UK was wrong. So another opportunity for Anthony and Spencer to maybe make a little ally in Raquel and Kayla. They opted not to. And they were wrong anyway because they did Norway, which is not part of the European Union.
Mm-hmm.
Akbar and Sherry nailed it. Ray and Caro. Apparently Caro lives in Germany. Never would have guessed that a million years with her. Kim and Penn nailed Germany, messed up with Norway. And then, like you said, Taylor and Isaiah get there late. They're late to the cake decorating party detour, but
definitely just copied.
They copied, and they just did what everybody else was doing. And we didn't say this earlier in the podcast about the puzzle at the art detour, but I wonder if when you walked in that room when people had all the walls and the art, you saw everybody else with the puzzle on the floor, it didn't click. Oh, this is a puzzle. It didn't seem to happen, and that's what bit Mike and Mo and the you-know-what, but in this case, Taylor and Isaiah definitely benefited from getting there late and just copying what everyone else had done.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think the biggest challenge with this particular detour was? Because the darts one was very straightforward. Can you hit the bullseye in 6 throws or not? But the cake one, what do you think the biggest challenge was there?
Knowing which countries and then executing. Because some people did not count the fruit, or they were sloppy. There was drippage. There was, and this cake judge was very generous in his tips, which is usually not the case with these amazing race, experts in their field. In this case, the baker.
It was very helpful.
Normally they just say no and they send the people back and they don't tell them what they need to change. This guy flat out said, like, oh, this one's not in the union, or this one, oh, you messed up the berries, count the berry. Like, he was so specific.
Right, it could have been a lot more difficult.
Yeah, it bothered me. I like to see the struggle.
You love to see them fail.
I love to see them squirm.
You definitely, when we live watched it, were immediately on with the blueberry counting. I don't think I would have thought of that initially. Obviously, once we saw more teams come in and more strategy get unveiled, that became clear. But credit to you for nailing that.
Thank you.
Yeah, because again, I would have been, let's just throw 3 darts and hit the bullseye, right? And me standing behind you like Sam Takani. And I think we would have been probably, if we went to the dart one, more Arun and Natalia than Dusty and Ryan or Sam and Connie per se. Like, it seemed like Arun and Natalia were there for a little while because they were both kind of struggling. I think the right choice would have been either of them. I don't think it was as clear as the previous Detour. Would you agree with that?
I agree.
A little bit more even than the artist versus Digiben. In the end, that was where it was ending. It ends with team number 1, Dusty and Ryan, front runners the whole time. From the Roadblock on, they were the only ones at the Roadblock. The rail mail, when they were there, they were in and out in seems like under a minute. Team number 1, Connie and Sam. My number 2 overall team helped me make a little bit more confidence feeling in me about them with a team number 2 finish. And Arun and Natalia, team number 3. Again, coincidence that they all went to the bullseye. Teams number 1, 2, and 3. Although I think both detours, like we said, were good choices. The darts ones end up being the teams number 1, 2, and 3. Team number 4, Raquel and Kayla. Big ups to my number 1 team. The flight attendants still staying strong, battling through that little hiccup of the UK not being in the EU. Kim and Penn, 5th. Caro and Ray, 6th. Anthony and Spencer. My, how the mighty have fallen. They fall from team number 1 to team number 7.
They'll be back.
Any concern there?
No, I'm not concerned.
Team number 8, Akbar and Sherry, our walking, talking quote machine. We only had, I probably could have written down a couple more, but the only one quote I had was, it wasn't a united front. Right? Like, does he really talk like that? I don't know. Maybe he does. And Akbar is just amazing. Really enjoying the Akbar quotes. They were team number 8. Taylor and Isaiah, team number 9, squeaking out of it. Again, doing what everyone else was doing at the Decorate Detour. Some tears were shed. Some emotion came out. Some relationship baggage was uncovered with Lulu and Lala finishing last.
Not surprised.
Why not?
Because they just scream drama. They thrive on it, and it will be their downfall. I was kind of disappointed that they got to stick around, to be honest.
So they come in last at the Russell Square Metro Station pit stop. Pretty cool pit stop. It was on a bus.
With tea.
Right. A spot of tea with Phil. And Lulu and Lala find themselves still in it. It's a non-elimination. But there wasn't any penalty. Why? Because they're still racing. Right? It wasn't an actual... I mean, it was a pit stop, but it wasn't.
There was no match.
Right. So ultimately, Lulu and Lala, despite the drama, despite the tears, despite the relationship baggage, backstory, whatever you want to call it, they have new life. They're still in the race. And as Josh always says, all you have to do is beat one team. Do you think going forward, Lulu and Lala can do that?
No. I think they were lucky with leg number 1. And now with this part...
Right, beating Mike and Mo.
Beating Mike and Mo, they were lucky. They did it by the hair of their teeth. Skin of their teeth. And...
Right, hair on their head, skin on their teeth.
Hair on their chinny chin chin, skin of their teeth.
I don't know, they don't have any hair on their chins. They look good.
Yeah.
Shout out to the twins.
Alright. I think they're just not lasting long.
I didn't like what I saw either. I don't see them lasting to my number 5 prediction. I see more of a 7, 8, 9 finish for them. Anything else you saw this leg of the race?
Well, my number 1s came in first this time around.
Dusty and Ryan.
Dusty and Ryan. Love this team. I think they're very strong.
I agree.
There's no weaknesses.
Yeah, it looked like they won this leg by a day. From the Roadblock, nobody was even with Ryan. When he went there, when he got out of it, they were finished before everyone. It was easy.
I was sad for them that there was no prize.
True.
I love a good prize.
I did like also the Connie and Sam, Arun, Natalia, strong finish. Raquel and Kayla, strong finish. Kim and Penn, strong finish. I didn't like what I saw in Caro and Ray. Remember, Ray made the mistake at the Roadblock as well as Penn. right? The overthinking, and then we saw Caro and Ray fighting in the cab. Him saying things like, "Oh, you weren't there. Until you were there, you won't know." And Caro was just furious too, and trying to walk him off the ledge, but not explode herself. And then we even saw a solo interview.
It's not good.
It's not good.
That can't be a good thing. There's no way a solo interview in the dark on a bench
I don't think we've ever seen anything like that.
can be a good thing.
No. Especially going into the last piece, because in the next episode, we see the preview of episode 2, in which after the leg is over, there will be the shutdown, the suspension of the race to COVID-19. The race will stop after the next leg, which is leg number 3, and we will have the COVID shutdown, and then some level of a time gap between the restart and the shutdown. And I don't think that that's going to bode well for the non-married couples, a.k.a. Caro and Ray.
Yeah, they're the only ones in a romantic relationship that are not married.
Right, because Raquel and Kayla, they're friends.
Yeah,
Dusty and Ryan, they're friends.
Or father and daughter, doesn't matter. Quarantine will not make or break their relationship.
But
long distance
LA and Jersey,
LA reality relationship, can't be a good thing.
If they make it through the next leg, the third leg, before the shutdown, because that third leg is going to be the last one before the shutdown. If they make it through, and I almost hope they do, because I'd like to see what happens to them on the other side of quarantine. I don't think they'll make it through that personally, because I know firsthand, and we know, like, it was not an easy time in anyone's life, let alone a long distance relationship. We'll see what happens, but I think we need to enjoy this third leg as what it is. I'm really excited to see what's going to happen with the Amazing Race.
It probably will never be the same.
Definitely not for season 33, definitely not season 34, but I hope it'll get back to what it once was in the next coming seasons. Last thing, because there was no elimination, our power rankings standings remain the same after episode 1 and the first 2 legs. Tied for 4th is Nicole and Jeremy with 63 points. Josh in 3rd with 60. Tom in 2nd with 56. And Lizzie still leading at 55. Join us next time. We will be talking episode 2, leg 3 of the race, here on the ReRACeables podcast. For Nicole, I'm Tom. Thanks for joining us. The blog has spoken. See you next time.